Welcome to episode 73 of the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram, and today's topic is types of animals, looking for inspiration for monsters and fantasy races. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Now, there are two things I need to give a special thanks to for this episode. One is Colorado State, which I kind of took my list here from, and from a documentary called Life from the BBC. It's currently on Netflix, or I have a link to Amazon in the show notes. And this documentary is really worth watching because it kind of breaks down different kinds of animals, and then it goes through different animals within the different categories, and it talks about special adaptations that they've gained and what the effect is. To be honest, I think the biggest effect you can have on creating new monsters or new races is look at nature. There are, chemical weapons. There are all sorts of ways creatures have learned to adapt to survive. And in those things can be inspirations for monsters to flesh out the bestiary of your world, or to even create races. And I'll probably talk about some different sort of brainstorming for specific types of races in different episodes. But today I kind of want to go over the types of animals that we consider in the world. First are mammals. Mammals have a few different characteristics that are very common. One, we have hair. And sometimes for certain mammals, the only way we know they're mammals is because they have hair. The amount of changes in mammals is large. They have backbones, and they're warm-blooded. That's really the characteristics that sort of connect all mammals, or most mammals probably. I'm sure there's some that don't fit into that. Reptilian. They're cold-blooded. They have scales. They also have backbones, and they lay eggs on land. Now, I don't know if they all lay them on land, but it's very common for them to lay them on land. Even think of like sea turtles that come back out of the ocean. Once a year, they dig holes. They put some eggs in holes, and they fill it up, and they go back in the water. And the problem is the young will die if they're underwater all the time. But then again, the predators get to them, they die too. It's not an easy life being a reptile. Birds. Birds are another type of animals that we consider. They have feathers. They're warm-blooded. They also lay eggs, and they also have backbones. So once again, birds. And now birds are interesting too because there are some theories that birds evolved from dinosaurs. I've even heard some people say the whole idea of a mass extinction of dinosaurs is flawed. And that might or might not be true. The argument I heard for that, though, was at the period of time that we think that asteroid wiped out all dinosaurs, we haven't found any fossils in that time period, which you would think would be odd because you think it'd be the most common time period to find fossils in if there was a mass extinction of the species. But whether or not they went mass extinct or they turned into birds or maybe a little bit of both, birds are here. They're an interesting creature type, and they often get overlooked, especially in the fantasy races. I had a friend, Matt Bannock, who built some interesting bird-focused species. Now, another type of species, one of the most interesting, are insects. Insects do get used for races of monsters a lot. Few characteristics of insects. They typically have 6 or more legs. They have 2 antennae, sensory objects. They are armored, and they are sectional. So they have hard bits of the body. You notice there's no backbone with insects. I don't think any insects have backbone, but I could be wrong. But their bodies are broken out into sections. They have multiple legs, more so than humanoids. That's not to say they could evolve to a less number of legs, but that would take the fun out of it, right? And there are some really fascinating adaptations for insects. And you can actually look at different types of insects and get ideas of how societies form in the insect community. And some of the insect societies are older than humanity. So, interesting topic, insects. Aquatic animals. Well, they have gills and they need to breathe. Obviously, that kind of goes in line with the gills. They usually also lay eggs, but I don't know how constant that is. But when I say they need to breathe, it can't be a still pool of water. Like if you put them in a fish tank and air doesn't get pushed into the fish tank, fish will die. Same thing with, I would imagine, every form of aquatic life, at least that we know of. And now, the reason I'm listing the animal types when talking about inspiration for creating monsters and creatures are, there's typically two ways to do it. One, you create monsters based off of mythology, and there's nothing wrong with this. And I would say some mythological monsters are based off of real animals anyway. You can do that, and it's fine, and I do that as well. If there's an interesting monster from mythology, there's actually some built-in latency for that monster type. That sort of archetype will exist in at least that culture of people. And if your main target's within that culture, it's a smart tactic because their boogeymans might be related to that mythological creature. So it's extremely important when thinking about monsters, though, is that there are different kinds of life, and different kinds of life have different reasons for existing. Now, you could increase to other new types. People try and go silicon or whatever, but they miss the fact that there are vast different amounts of life on this planet already. Life that with some form of intelligence. And so to take that and modify that to get that into a new being is one thing. I think it's important to think beyond this idea of, and I've read this a lot, it's humanoid or non-humanoid races for fantasy. And I think that's too short-sighted. There are advantages to being standing. There are advantages to it. That's why certain creatures adapt that way. Other creatures, when they have even more legs, there are different kinds of advantages. If you want sentience, the question is what's going to cause it in your world, and how do you get there from these backdrops? And like I said, I'll probably go ahead and come up with some specific examples. And then maybe I'll make up my own kind, let's say silicon, because for some reason people are obsessed with that. I don't buy into that being important or necessary in a cold location, but I'll do some brainstorming and maybe come up with a silicon-based life form as well, too, just to sort of play with it. Even though I don't know if they can exist, maybe they can, maybe they can't. It's really unimportant. Silicon being very close to carbon, being the reason why people think that might be an alternate form of life. And if you want a truly unique form of life, you need the silicon blob. The thing is, realize that you have different types of mammals. Oftentimes you'll see most species of races in fantasy worlds are mammals. And reptilians are probably number 2, and then insects are probably number 3. Not a lot of fish, not a lot of bird races, even though there are, I'm sure, a few of each. And no, I do not consider merpeople to be aquatic. Usually they're mammals, much like whales who live underwater, which makes it difficult, but hey, that's what they do. But there's nothing to say you couldn't have a merfolk that are aquatic based because they have gills. But there are things you have to think about. But think about life as it exists today. If you want to create a reptile species, go to some documentary like Life or something specifically about reptiles and do researches. Look for ways that they've adapted successfully. And then extrapolate from that what you think it takes for them to become sentient, if that's the goal for your race, or to whatever level of intelligence they want. The rating for this episode is basic. It's a basic to have labels for how we think about things. And when we create those labels, we can use those labels to research to get to the specific inspiration that we're looking for. The world building task for the day. Break down your list of races into categories of animals that I listed above and see if it doesn't fall into the path where most are mammals. And then you have maybe some races that fall in non-animal category. And if you have a category not listed here, let me know. Contact me on Twitter or through my email newsletter and let me know. And I would love to check it out. The real world task for the day. Take multiple perspectives on a situation. That's the whole idea of look at a problem from different angles. What created the situation? Or why does the situation exist? But the more perspectives you can look at it, the more ways you can find to solve the problem and the more likely you are to find the simplest way to solve the problem. And sort of going to evolution, that's always the ultimate task, is to save energy for other more important tasks. And the tease for the next episode is dinner time, fantasy world building, and food. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.